bam 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 dai 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 bam 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 hai lai di dai dai bam 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 dai bam bam hai lam bam bai dai dai bam 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 bam. So we're sitting here together, and that's an accomplishment in itself. That was you didn't get together, and we're getting together for a simcha, for a joy. Let me take a step back for a moment. I've been listening a lot to a lot of very, very, very good Chassidim, very smart Chassidim, each one giving their insight, and there's so much to learn from them, from what they said, and so on. And ultimately, it's really about each person's personal feeling and personal perspective of what today is. So I want to start off first with the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak. He was an only child and an only son. So his relationship with his father was incredibly deep. Very, very, two souls literally that merged into one. And when his father left him, on the second day of Nisan, he passed away, I think it was 1920, he took it very hard and he got very ill and he got sick with TB and so on. That year, he put out a lesson for, I think it was the first year. When it came to the yard site of his father, he wrote a letter to the Chassidim. And the main point of the letter was that a shepherd does not leave his flock. But he prefaced it by two words, or three words. Imdu hachein, two words. Imdu means stop, hachein, prepare yourself for a day of blessing. Now, I understand the concept of writing to the Chassidim that they should not be depressed. Their Rebbe who went to heaven is still with them, so they should not feel bad. But what is this idea of imdu, stand, v'hachein, and prepare yourself? And I realized just on an elementary level that what is today? Today is the third day of Tammuz. All of us, and we'll talk, God willing, about the Rebbe, our relationship to the Rebbe. But during the year, we're constantly in movement. So there's one day of the year where the first thing you have to do is imdu, stop. Just stop. You know, you've seen, I'm sure, when it says about, I've seen the signs for earthquake, or a fire, it says stop, and then roll on the ground. If you're moving, you can't really concentrate. So on a day which is such an important day, as we will try to discuss together, such an important day, the first thing is imdu, we have to stop. And we stopped, we're here, and tens of thousands, probably closer to hundreds of thousands of Jewish, did a stop on their daily routine. Why? Because today is Gimmel Tammuz, and we have to reflect just for a moment about the day and the personality of the day. And then there is prepare yourself. Just stopping doesn't really do the right justice to the power of the day. You have to prepare yourself for the day. If I told you how to prepare for Pesach, some people start cleaning the house from Hanukkah, some from Purim, some from 2 weeks before, some do a marathon 48 hours, and some call up the Chabad house 1 hour before the Seder. I just realized tonight is Passover, do you have room? But the bottom line is, there are many levels of preparation. So even the smallest preparation is a preparation. So for example, if
any one of us or all of us actually gave a little bit more charity today, and it's not too late, or said an extra chapter of Tehillim, or maybe studied something from Maimonides, which was the Rebbe's love that all of us should study Rambam every single day, and Chitas. This was some form of preparation, maybe small, maybe very small. But in order to receive the blessings of today, there has to be a moment in your mind and in your heart where you just stop for a second. Stop and say to yourself, we're Chassidim, there's a Rebbe, there's a Moshe, something happened, something is happening, I want to be involved with what is happening. Just that very idea of concentrating opens us up to actually a little bit more of what the day is about. So what is the day? So let me first tell you, today is the third day of Tammuz. In history, many things happened, starting from the miracle that happened in the days of Joshua. In 1927, there was a miracle that happened with the sixth Rebbe. He was under a death sentence, and on the third day of Tammuz, the government actually did something unusual, and that is they took away that death sentence and instead sentenced him to a form of exile, which 18 days later was also rescinded. So those are two historical important events. But for us, when we get together today, it's a reminder of that on the third day of Tammuz, the Rebbe now goes a long line. What do we fill in? A gentle way of saying it is, he transitioned from a physical existence to an existence where he's not bound by the body. Some people would say he passed on. I won't be that coarse and say he died. But I just want to fix it on the calendar. The third day of Tammuz, 30 years ago, 1994, the foremost Jewish leader, the seventh leader of Chabad, seemed to have changed from being in this world to a different form of existence. Okay. What's the hesitation about saying he died? I mean, come on, wake up. Smell the roses. Be realistic. And we say to ourselves, it can't be. So there are different tangents to go on. One of the tangents, which the Rebbe himself spoke about very often, was that the sign of life is growth. So when something stops growing, it's a sign that there's not much life left. And of course, eventually, if life is not continuing, we get something called death. We have a dead tree, a dead this, a dead ideology, and so on. The greater the growth, the more of an indication of that there's true life. So we look at something called the Chabad movement. We look at the Rebbe's influence on the world. We look at the Rebbe's honor and prestige and so on, and it grows from literally day to day. So we say to ourselves, that does not fit in with the concept of death. Because if it's death, there should be no growth. And it's been repeated so many times that there's the idea of, when you take a look at the growth of the Chabad movement in terms of the centers and so on, today we have the majority of people who are running the centers and being very dedicated and committed to the ideals of Chabad Lubavitch and consider themselves working directly under the Rebbe. These are all people that were born after Gimmel Tammuz, meaning they never had an opportunity to receive something physical from the Rebbe. And yet, they're very much alive, very much connected, because the Rebbe is alive. We have to understand this, though. What does that mean? So I was thinking, for me personally, it used to be Gimmel Tammuz was bittersweet. Why is it bittersweet? What sweetness can we find? Well, we're taught by the Rebbe himself and the teachings of the Zohar that the passing of a tzaddik is called Hilula. Hilula actually means, there's one meaning is Hallel, praise, but there's another word another meaning of the word Hilula, literally celebration, which is connected with the word light, L-I-G-H-T. And this is found in a verse in the book of Job, Bihalu Nero, my candle was illuminated. So Hilula basically means that it's a day where there's a progression of light. What does that mean, a progression of light? Every time we do a mitzvah, we know and we believe that we're creating a spiritual light, a spiritual energy, a positive force in creation. At the end of a life, what happens is that all of those, if you want to call it flames, each mitzvah is another flame, each mitzvah comes together, and therefore at the end of a person's mission on earth, what happens is that all of those sparks of light and flames of light come together, and as the soul ascends to heaven, it ascends in a form of a blazing torch. When Chassidim celebrate a yahrzeit, not necessarily of a tzaddik, of a parent, or even of a teacher, of a very good friend, what we're reminded of is all of their good deeds, and because on the day of a yahrzeit, time repeats itself, so then on this day, all of their mitzvahs are once again gathered together, and the flame is now appreciated even more. So when we talk about the yahrzeit, the day of the year when a tzaddik transitions, so what happens then is that the gazillion mitzvahs, and there are mitzvahs that you do directly, and then through your students, and then through your students, and through the ripple effect that there is no end, all of those lights come together. And therefore the day of a tzaddik's transitioning is actually a day of tremendous blessing. So what are we doing here today? Not to reminisce about the Rebbe at all, though we'll talk about it, and not to be sad at all, heaven forbid, but basically to open up our heart and say, today is a day of tremendous blessing. And there's a sense of oneness with the Rebbe, and I want to explain it the following way. You know, look around, I'm very proud that we have a working library. It's only a tiny library in comparison to a true, and of course, the main part of a Jewish library would include Talmud, Mishnah and Talmud. When we take a look at, let me go back for a moment. Why do they not say what happened on this day? They always call it the 3rd of Tammuz. Today is Gimmel Tammuz. Let's contrast this for a second. In the Chassidic world, 19 of Kislev, Yutes Kislev, Nu Gershon. What's Yutes Kislev? All right, it's the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. It's the day we mark liberation from the Alter Rebbe. Chayel al 18 of Elul, birthday of the two great luminaries. When it comes to Gimmel Tammuz, what is the title? Like, what are we celebrating on Gimmel Tammuz? Good. So if you take a look in the Talmud, as I started off with, there's a holiday in Hebrew called Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year, the head of the year, and there's a Talmud, a tractate, which is called Rosh Hashanah. What do you think it discusses? The laws of Rosh Hashanah and many other details. When we take a look at Sukkot, right, there's a Masechta Sukkah. What does it talk about? Sukkot. When it comes to Passover, there's a Masechta called Pesachim. And what does it talk about? Passover and the Paschal Lamb. When we talk about a fast day, there's also a book called Tainus. There's only one book in the Talmud that discusses a holiday without giving it a name. There is no Talmud called Yom Kippurim. The name of the book that talks about Yom Kippur is called Yuma, the day. And I was thinking, I'm sure the commentators talk about it, but let me tell you what I was thinking. How could it be that a beautiful, like 90 pages of discussion of the Day of Atonement doesn't have it on its title? It's called The Day. The rabbis explain that Yom Kippur is not only the day of forgiveness, it is the day, period. It is a day where there's a oneness between God and his people. He does not look at sin. He does not look at any barriers between him and his beloved children. There's only oneness. In the prayer book, we say it is a day that has 5 prayers. The Kabbalists teach, without going into it now, there are 5 levels of the soul. On a holiday, 3 of those levels are engaged directly, 1 indirectly. But only 1 day a year on Yom Kippur is the Yechida, the oneness of the soul united with the oneness of its maker. In fact, what we call Ne'ilah, which is the last prayer, which means closing of the gates, the rabbis tell us that means it's your neshama is locked in a private place, you and God, there's nothing else. And such an awesome day where the Yechida, where the oneness becomes one with Hashem, cannot even be titled the Day of Atonement. It's much more than that. It's not only a day of forgiveness, it is the day. For me, Gimmel Tammuz, that's what we're here. Not necessarily to give a title to the day. Today, a Chassid says, I have a Rebbe. Can you explain it? Not really. Can you feel it? Sometimes. So, how do you know? I just know. I just know that the Yechida of my soul, the oneness that symbolizes the quintessential spark of godliness, is today reconnecting to God through a Moses who acts as a form of connection and as a form of connection to bring the creation and the Creator into one. So it doesn't need a name. Gimmel Tammuz is fine. It's the 3rd day of Tammuz. Today, where's the joy? Well, for one thing, the joy is obvious. If the Rebbe is with us, and because the Rebbe is with us, and it's already 30 years where not only the mitzvahs that we do, and the Torah that we do, and so on, but his personal input of his own holiness gets revealed 30 times over year after year. So the blessings are today much more accessible than ever before. But there is another concept, and it occurred to me that all of us struggle with, this is a fact, we struggle with reconciling 2 realities. One reality is we're human and physical. Another reality, and I call it a reality, is what is commonly called spirituality. We accept the concept that there is a spiritual world, spiritual energies, godliness, and at the same time we are with our 10 fingers, and we really struggle. How do we put the 2 together? And I realized that today, Gimmel Tammuz is a victory day. You know why? Because we celebrate the Rebbe, and we don't have to see his body. Today, we're mystics. We're living mystically. We're living Kabbalistically. We're actually living truthfully. The body is nothing more than an abode or a container for God, for godliness. And we say it, we believe it, and it's really hard to live a 24-hour day like that. So So we spend time davening and learning and doing mitzvahs and studying Torah so we can get a little bit out of our physicality. And then it comes once a year, and you say, the Rebbe's with us. You got to be happy. The Rebbe's giving us strength. You say, yeah, where is he? You don't see him? No, I don't see him. So how do you know he's here? Because Ruchnius is true. Spirituality is true. God is true. Not everything we see is actually reality. We have eyes that deceive us constantly. We have people that we trust who fool us. Ruchnius is real. One of the times of the year where we actually celebrate it is on Gimmel Tammuz. The Rebbe was right. One more thought I want to point out, a little bit cuckoo thought, but it's okay, I guess. The greatness of saying L'chaim is, it excuses both of us. It excuses me for saying things which, whatever, and excuses you for not listening. So it's really of mutual benefit. L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim. The third alphabet. Here's a question for you. Who has a better picture of Moshe Rabbeinu? I want to ask you, especially if you didn't watch the Ten Commandments. If you watch the Ten Commandments, you know exactly how Moses looks. He's a good-looking guy, Charles Heston. No. So forget, if you didn't watch that, you only read the book, but you never saw the movie, okay? How would you picture Moshe Rabbeinu? Now, you don't have to tell me. I don't know. It doesn't make a difference. However you want to picture him might be the right picture. But here's a question. The people that saw Moshe, he comes to them and he takes them out of Egypt and he brings them to the mountain, and for 39 years he teaches them Torah. They actually saw him, right? They saw his physical body. Did they have an accurate picture of him? In other words, who has a more accurate picture? In our imagination, or they who actually saw him? I hope you find this an intriguing question. I'm fascinated by this question. Let me tell you what I think. I think that we have a much better a picture of what Moshe Rabbeinu might have looked like than them. Why? Because they saw a human being, a soul in a body. And their definition of a human being was based on what they consider a human being. So if Moshe, God forbid, if Moshe Rabbeinu would have a third eye, he would be considered unusual, and to use a terrible word, a freak. If he had another hand, ugh. So they had to see Moshe as a human being. And actually this came back to bite them. Why? Moshe Rabbeinu is 40 days on the mountain, and they don't see him coming back. Say, well, I guess he died. And according to the Talmud, the Satan or the evil one showed a picture of Moshe Rabbeinu's body in the clouds. Now, actually, I saw a comment that says it really wasn't a lie, because when Moshe Rabbeinu was on a mountain for 40 days, not eating, not drinking, not sleeping, to a certain extent, he was divested of his body. And the true Moshe, the true essence was revealed. But they saw a body. They said, oh, he's not coming back. Me and you have no doubt that if Moshe would tell us, I'm choosing this man as my second in command, we would not doubt him. Because we know that Moshe the man is Moshe the godly man. He's not only Moshe Ha'ish, but Moshe Ish Elohim. He is a godly man. And you don't mess, you don't question, you don't doubt a godly person. But if you see a human person, and and you're told the divine presence is talking through his voice. He said, but I hear a human voice. That's not his voice. He's relating what God is talking to him. It gets difficult. You have to be a refined individual not to allow your vision of his physicality to define him. And that's why we never saw Moshe, the famous Moshe that we read about in the Bible. And we never saw Aaron, and we never saw Joshua, and we never saw Miriam, we never saw Queen Esther. And it's very possible that whatever imagination you have in your mind is actually far more accurate, far more genuine than what they saw. Because they were looking at a tzaddik or a tzaddeket, they were looking with their eyes, measuring that person. I studied with the Rebbe, not personally, together with thousands of Chassidim. And in many, many ways, that in retrospect has not necessarily propelled me further. Let me explain. The private audience that a person had with the Rebbe was very different than being in a room with many hundreds or thousands of people listening to him. It was a very different experience, and it was meant to emphasize a oneness with oneness. As if when you walked into the Rebbe's room, there should have been nothing else other than, I'm going to see my Rebbe. And the Rebbe does not need me to repeat that, but for the Rebbe there was nothing else other than this individual over there. So I had 3 such encounters. By my bar mitzvah, yechidus, private audience, and then, I don't remember, 16 or 17, my birthday, and then the 3rd time with my wife-to-be, Chassan and Kala, because at that time, it wasn't only me and my wife, it was a couple of grooms and a couple of, but it didn't minimize the yechidus. What do I remember of them is very little. But I'll be a little personal over here. When I came in for my bar mitzvah, every one of you has heard stories how the Rebbe started a conversation. What are you learning? Tell me your pilpul. I came in, and I just remember, I don't think there was more than, it's hard for me to know now, but I really don't think there was more than 10 seconds the Rebbe looked at me. So my father and mother come in. I'm the bar mitzvah boy. This is our Ahron, the bar mitzvah. He's getting bar mitzvah. And then he spoke to my parents. What he said, it was really, I was almost like the ticket to get in. They needed an excuse. But really, the Rebbe was interested, it seemed to me, with my parents. And I don't remember anything. I do remember, though, one thing that my mother said. She's a pretty funny lady when she was talking to the Rebbe. She was very emotional in general. She only went once or twice, and after that, whenever she would see, she would cry, get very much. She didn't go, really. But for Yechidah, she went in, and she asked for a bracha for my grandfather. His name was Zaidi Baruch. His name was Baruch ben Eliyahu. Anyway, she said, I'm asking a bracha for my grandfather, for her father. So the Rebbe looked up. My mother says, I want a bracha should be 30 years younger. That's what she said. So the Rebbe smiled and told my mother that Hashem is great and he can do many things, but this is not something that he wants to take care of. But he was a gentleman besides being a Rebbe. You know, he dealt with everyone. He said, but I will write down the name. And he wrote down Baruch Ben, and my mother, I think, got flustered, didn't say but the Rebbe knew. The Rebbe wrote down his name, Baruch ben Eliyahu, or I don't know, my great-grandmother's name. That I remember. Okay. By the way, a P.S., my brother Sruli works in Cheder Menachem. So we always tell stories about the past. Cheder Menachem, which has like 300 kids in LA, has all of the students, almost all of them, their parents and grandparents were Chabadniks. So they went for a school project. they asked the children to get a story from their family about the Rebbe. Beautiful. I have 5 books. You can see them. Anyway, one of them is from a kid called, I think his name is Yisrael Pinson, I don't remember exactly. And he writes, this is a story, that his father was an Israeli. And he came to 770 to study. He gets a phone call from his parents. Your Zayda, your grandfather had some type of an issue. We heard you're going in to the Rebbe for a private audience in a day or two. Please mention him. Okay? He goes into the Rebbe, and he says to the Rebbe, my grandfather had a medical something or other, and we asked the Rebbe's blessing. So the Rebbe says, what's his name? He tells him his name. Let's make believe. Eliyahu. What's his mother's name? I don't know my grandfather's mother. And he for a minute, he doesn't say anything. And the Rebbe says in Yiddish, I think it was Tzivya Bas something or other. And he wrote it down. He had no question about it. I mean, how does a Rebbe know stuff like that? I do not know. I'm not a Rebbe. But getting back to me, he wrote down, so that made an impression on me. Later on, I was like sort of, not insulted, hurt. Why didn't the Rebbe spend any time with me? When it came 16 or 17, it was the same thing. Same thing. You know, before you saw the Rebbe, you would really try to fast that day, even though we're no holy rollers, but before you went to the Rebbe, you fasted. The night before, you said the Shema, you went to the mikveh, you tried to be less offensive, you know, spiritually speaking. So I walk in, and I give the Rebbe my settle. In all honesty, I remember nothing other than, it seemed to me I walked in, he looked at me, and I walked out. Already when it came to the third time, I was lucky. My wife was there. And I was also lucky that there were other Chassanim there. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because it just shows you how seeing a body is counterproductive. I have to take the Rebbe's time. He did what he had to do. If all I needed was a 10-second gaze, that's all I needed. And if it was, if it was not, I wouldn't even say the word to humble me. If it was necessary for me, he did. But then when you look at the Rebbe with human eyes, you say, it's not fair. Everyone else was there for a minute and a half. And someone else the Rebbe smiled at. And someone else the Rebbe said, I'd like to know more about you. The Chassidim today, over 30 years, don't have that problem. They don't have that problem. They don't measure the Rebbe by their standards. They know, as we know, our Rebbe knows what he's doing. Our Rebbe is a person who caters to each and every person's personal need. For some, they need a second. For some, they need longer. My father, blessed memory, always got a smile from the Rebbe. I mean, a beautiful smile. You know what made the Rebbe smile so wonderful was, it was absolutely contagious. It was funny. By a Farbrengen, you could sometimes see it in a video. If the Rebbe would smile at someone, suddenly 1,300 people would smile. I don't know the trick. I don't get it. But it was a fact. It was absolutely a fact. The Rebbe would smile at a person, and everyone's smiling. I mean, the Rebbe, they say about the Alter Rebbe, interesting, the Maggid of Mezrich gave him a gift. The gift was a smile. But the Alter Rebbe, in other words, with the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, his smile would conquer a person, just with a smile. However, because the Alter Rebbe was the founder of Chabad, which deals with the mind and understanding, he refused to use that as a gift to conquer people. But the fact of the matter is, even when you see it on the video, the Rebbe's smile, lichtig, it's just light. It's just light. And when the Rebbe would smile, everyone would smile. So my father used to get that smile, that type of a smile. Another chassid right next to him, or right before him, didn't get it. And they were not jealous. My father needed the smile, and he deserved it. And the other chassid did not need it, so he didn't get it. But this is something that you could measure. How come he didn't smile at me? Today, you don't look at that smile. He's smiling at each and every one of us 24/7.
Just in case.
You don't have to see the Rebbe from your perspective. Understand the Rebbe the way he is. This is a neshama. This is a soul that includes all of the souls of his generation, in particular those that are connected to him in a personal way. Dov Greenberg always says it, not always, but he made it a really nice comment. He said, if you go into a museum, the people that are there are either really interested in the artifact or they're trying to make believe they're interested. But if a guy is into soccer, he doesn't go to the Museum of Modern Art. That's not what he's interested in. And if you go to a place where the Space Museum, whatever it is, it's not going to be someone necessarily, again, who's interested in Batman or Robin. So you would think to yourself, who comes to a Chabad house? People that are interested in Chabad. He says you can never find them there. Some of them run the place, but the only people that are in Chabad are people not interested, not in Chabad, not in Judaism, but they are partial to Kugel. Yeah. But that's really getting the Rebbe without a physical barrier. It's not Chabad. It's the Rebbe who's a Raya Yisrael. So, once again, let me just try to summarize. Today is a day where we celebrate the Rebbe. And we celebrate the Rebbe in terms of each and every one of us has a connection to our Rebbe. And it's a very personal connection and a very powerful connection, and it strengthens us. The fact that we don't see him physically is a cause of sadness until you realize that the Gashmius is also a form of concealment. Today, every one of us and our children and grandchildren, God willing, and so on, can connect and will connect to the Rebbe in an absolute, genuine, authentic way, not less than people like me who were privileged to grow up in 770, and far from it. They're much, much stronger. And in a general sense, I think that today is really one of the most powerful days, not only because we're connected to the Rebbe's holiness, his energy, and his blessing, but today we are celebrating the supremacy of spirituality over materiality. We're emphasizing and committing to the truth that there's inside of me, there's a soul which is far more powerful and more real to me than my nails. But I feel my nails. I don't feel my soul. Well, if today I celebrate the Rebbe, today I'm celebrating a neshama as the truth. And that should really give us strength for the entire year. L'chaim. L'chaim l'bracha, l'chaim, l'chaim. All of us know from the Chumash, Moshe Rabbeinu, he's on the mountain for 40 days. He receives the Torah. He comes down. He sees the Jewish people in a degraded form. And really, to save his people, he breaks the tablets. After destroying the source of idolatry and reminding the people of what they did, he says, I'm going to pray for you. Goes back up on the mountain for 40 days. And Hashem says, I forgive the people and tell them that we're going to start again. So in 40 days from now, I'll give them the second tablets. So Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people, Rosh Chodesh Elul, that Hashem has forgiven them, but they should prepare for this great event. And 40 days later, he comes down on Yom Kippur, the 10th day of Tishrei, carrying the second set of tablets. The rabbis tell us, and it's in the Chumash, it's not even commentary, it's in the text. You read that when he came down from the mountain carrying the tablets, his face was shining. There were rays of light that were coming from his face, and people were very frightened. And this is pretty amazing. They had seen him already, during the entire period of when they went into in Egypt and outside of Egypt. They saw him by the giving of the Torah, and they saw him actually coming down the mountain the first time. But the idea of the lights coming from his face was just so overwhelming that they were frightened. What did Moshe Rabbeinu realize? That he could not interact with the people if they were so frightened of him. So he put a mask on his face. So the Chumash tells us he always wore that mask unless he was teaching. When he was teaching the Torah, I guess he felt it was not respectful, maybe, I don't know the words to use, but he took off the mask and he taught. So the time when the Jewish people got a chance to bask in the glory of his face was when he taught Torah. So if he was involved with other things, not directly in terms of teaching, perhaps figuring out what to do next, advising and directing, the people would talk to him, he would wear a mask. But when he taught formally Torah, the mask was off. This is what it says in the Chumash. I believe that this is a message about our Rebbe, that there are so many nice things that people say about Rabbi Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. His brilliance, his charisma, his energy, his piercing eyes, and so on and so forth. But actually, what is most grasping and transformational is the Torah. When the Rebbe gives a teaching, and there's 70 books or so that has his teachings. I only have a small part, and there was a time when I actually knew a lot of the Likutei Sichos. You see the glory, and you see not only the glory, but how it captivates you. Let me tell a story. This is a story which I don't know if it's true, but it's one of these stories that could have been true if it's not. And it has a ring of authenticity, so it might actually be true. I heard this from Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, of blessed memory. He tells the story as follows. The holy Baal Shem Tov, all of us have heard of him. His love of to a fellow Jew, and in general, into God's creations, nature and non-Jews as well, but the love that he had to a fellow Jew was something which is hard to describe. His chief student said, I only wish I could teach and not teach, I could kiss the Torah with the same love and devotion that my master was able to kiss a child. Not necessarily did he know the child, a Jewish kid. So that the Baal Shem Tov's house, heart, mind, was open to his people. We all know that Jewish people have very, very saintly, very wise, and we also have our fair share of people that we would call criminal. And in the days of the Baal Shem Tov, a crime that was often perpetuated was stealing a horse. Today it would be in San Francisco, there's nothing to talk about. Don't leave your stuff, they break into the car. People steal cars, they used to steal horses. So the story goes that there was a fellow, a Jewish man, and he had a passion and a love for horses, especially if they didn't belong to him. So he became very good in acquiring contraband, riding it, enjoying it, and then selling it in the next town. Of course, people in those days were not scared to take the law in their own hand, because there was no law. So if they would find a horse thief, it was almost universally accepted that you could beat the living daylights out of him, including up to death, So this passion of his to steal horses was a dangerous passion, but he couldn't control himself. So the story goes, one time he stole a horse, and he miscalculated because he thought that the fellow that he stole the horse from didn't have a large circle of friends, but it just so happened to be that he was very popular, and he quickly puts together, I think it's called a posse, a group of people. We have to go find this guy. The man is only one town ahead, and he realizes that eventually they're going to catch up to him. He needs a miracle. Well, what does he know about miracles? Nothing. But he does know that there are holy people that somehow have an in with God. He had heard stories about the Baal Shem Tov. So he runs to Mezebush, and he manages to go to the holy Baal Shem Tov, and he says, Rabbi, I need a miracle. Baal Shem Tov, in his holiness and humility, says, how can I help you? And he says, how can you help me? They're after me. Who's after? He told the story. He steals horses, and now they're very close to catching him. So the Baal Shem Tov says, you're not supposed to steal. He said, I know, I can't help myself. I'll try not to do it again. Baal Shem Tov says, if that's the case, I'll help you. And he gave a bracha that all of those people that are trying to follow him should lose interest. Sure enough, 2 days pass, and he's hiding, and he finds out that the group of people that were looking for him disappeared. Baruch Hashem, he didn't start putting on tefillin or keeping Shabbos. He didn't become more religious, but he certainly was appreciative that the Baal Shem Tov pulled strings in heaven. Well, not too many months passed, and the same thing happened. Again, he just can't resist himself. There was a beautiful horse, and there was positively asking to be stolen because the fellow left it unguarded, and it was like the car is open with the key in the ignition, and it says, steal me. And that's what he did. He stole the horse. Stole the horse, it repeats itself. They're almost about to catch him, and he realizes he can't run away. What should he do? He needs a miracle. He runs to Mezebush, and he says, Rabbi, please, this time I really need it. What do you really need? I stole, I'm sorry, I wasn't strong enough, I really regret it, but they're going to kill me. I need a bracha. Try not to do this again. No, I won't do it again, but I give you a bracha that they should not find you. And sure enough, they gave up. And this time he kept it for 2-3 years. Really hard. The horses seem to be getting nicer and nicer, and the owners less and less disciplined. And finally, after 3 years of not stealing, he just couldn't hold himself back. And there was a shipment of horses to some nobleman who was a big connoisseur of horses, and he bought some beautiful horses. And this guy managed to steal one of them. When he stole one of them, didn't take long. Right away, the word was spread out that there's a horse thief, and based on what we think, he looks like this and like that. The horse is this and this. Anyone wants to sell it to you, report him to the authorities. And he realizes this time he for sure is going to get caught. He was embarrassed, because he had promised the great rabbi he wouldn't do it, but twice he broke his word. But, his hide was important. So he runs to Mezebush. He sees everyone, he says, I need the holy Baal Shem Tov. You need the holy Baal Shem Tov? We also need the holy Baal Shem Tov. Fine, so let's all go together. They look at him, don't you know what happened? No, what happened? In the early summer on Shavuos, the holy Baal Shem Tov left us. He's in heaven. And we're desolate. Our Rebbe left us. We all need the Baal Shem Tov. And he says, but I really need him. They're going to kill me if I don't get him. Did he leave anyone great, any one of his great students? So they say, there's you see that gentleman, he's a holy saint. His name is Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Polna. He was one of his greatest students. He runs over to him and he shakes him. The guy looks at this fellow, what do you want? He said, I stole a horse, I need a blessing. He looks at him like he's a nut. You stole a horse and you need a blessing from, what kind of a blessing? That you should be a better thief? No. I need a blessing that I should not be caught. He said, why would I want to give you such a blessing? So you can keep on doing sin? But your master did. Go to my master. He realizes that no one's going to give him a blessing when he tells them that he's a thief. And he wants a blessing not to become religious. He wants a blessing so he could continue being a thief. So he finds out where the Baal Shem Tov is buried. The ground was still fresh. He fell on the grave, put his face, and began to cry. And began to say, Holy Rebbe, who's going to be my Rebbe? Everyone wants to be a Rebbe over the righteous. You're the only one that wanted to be a Rebbe over a thief. How could you leave me? No one's interested in taking care of me. And he cried so much that he sort of fell asleep almost, in exhaustion. And he was quite sure that he heard a voice. The Baal Shem Tov says to him, if my students won't help you, my grandson will. His grandson's name was Ephraim, and he wrote a book called Degel Machna Ephraim. It's a classic in Chassidic literature. He was the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. So he's telling the Baal Shem Tov, if I tell him that you sent me, he's not going to believe me. He said, I'll tell you what. Every Thursday, my grandson opens up the Chumash of the parsha of the week, and he studies, and I come and I tell him an interpretation. I'll tell you this interpretation. When you go to my grandson and you say that I'm coming from your grandfather, he's going to say, what's the proof? And you'll tell him this thought. The only way that you could know this thought is if I told it to you. And he'll help you. So he repeats it 2-3 times, and he gets up, and he travels to the grandson of the Holy Baal Shem Tov. He came on a Thursday night, and he was about to begin this holy tzaddik. The grandson, Rabbi Ephraim, was about to begin studying, and suddenly someone comes into his private and study, and he says, your grandfather sent me here, and I want a blessing. And he said, a blessing for what? I need a blessing. I'm a thief. I am a thief. I know it's wrong, but I don't deserve to die. I need a blessing. I should be saved. So the Degel, who had inherited his grandfather's love of a fellow Jew, said, but if I give you such a blessing, how do I know you're going to change? He said, your grandfather never made that condition with me. He gave the blessing. How do I know that what you're telling me is true? He said, I'll tell you. And he gave over, word for word, what the Baal Shem Tov had taught him. And he said, this is what you just studied with your grandfather, is it not? And he looks at him in amazement. Yes, it is. Now that's the proof that I'm coming from the Baal Shem Tov. He said, well, if my grandfather wants me to give you such a blessing, I give you a blessing that they should lose hope of finding you. And that's where the story seems to end, except for a very big postscript. What happened was, he left, and he figured it's going to take a couple of months until it wears off. But he found something very strange. Once he had heard and absorbed a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, his mind did not allow him to think of stealing. And eventually he comes back to the Degel Machna Ephraim, and he says, I want to do tshuva and start from the beginning. And the end of it is that he became one of the great students of the Degel, but the Chassidim never mentioned his name, not to embarrass him that he was once a horse thief. End of the story. The power of the story to me is reminding me, you could tell stories of the Rebbe's miracles. They are in the thousands, absolutely true stories, especially if it happened to you. It's a true story, amazing stories. And then you say, I really feel bad. I didn't get $1 from him. I feel terrible. I never had an opportunity to interact with him. Who doesn't want a miracle? But the miracles are there. It's enough to get you excited until the next movie that you watch. And then Hollywood also has movies with miracles. And it's a miracle story. If you study the Rebbe's teachings, there's no question you're going to be not only captivated, you're going to change. Because the Rebbe has such an amazing, beautiful way in how to look at Torah, how to look at business, how to look at family, how to look at community, how to look at exile, how to look at yourself. It's without a doubt, this way of thinking is something that changes us. When you take a look at Chabad.org, whatever it might be, there are, without exaggeration, millions of people through that and through many other websites and through our Chabad centers and maybe even through each and every one of you. You shared a thought from the Rebbe, and suddenly there's a new perspective on life. Actually, I'm not making a commercial. If you go to Chabad.org, they actually just have a beautiful 13-minute video. It's worthwhile watching. I think it's called Points of Inspiration. 4 people, each one different, how the Rebbe's teachings changed their life. When you take a look at the first and foremost teaching of the Rebbe, and he said it in the beginning of his Nasias when he became the Rebbe, and repeated it, I think, in Tafshin Lamed or Tafshin Mem, whatever. He said, we have the wrong idea. We look at the world, and the expression in English is, the world is a jungle. Now, if you're in a jungle, you have to come prepared. You need weapons, you need provisions, you're like this, you're always looking to make sure that you're not going to be attacked because it's a jungle. And you can't walk straight. You have to look down to make sure you're not going to go over a snake or over a weed. You have to look up to make sure the world is not a jungle. The world is a garden. That's what he said, quoting the Medrash. The world is a garden. It's a beautiful place, this world. If it's a garden, it needs a gardener. And that's where me and you come in. That teaching changes everything. Absolutely changes everything. It's not confrontational with the world. It's not something we have to be frightened of the world. It's looking for the beauty that's found in this world. And it is a beautiful world with infinite beauties to be expressed. And we can do it through the Torah, through living a life of following the directions of the one above. We can bring out the beauty of this world. The Rebbe, when did he do this teaching? Amazing. His first public address. I want to jump now to one of his last addresses. One of his last public statements was, I did everything that I could do to hasten and to bring Mashiach. Let me substitute those words for a second. I did everything I could do to bring out the beauty that's found in this world. Now it's up to each and every one of you to continue this work. The idea of changing a world. You have all heard this story of the great man who thought he's going to change the world, and no one listened to him. Then he said he was going to change his city, and no one listened to him. He changed his community, no one listened to him. Changed his synagogue, no one listened to him. Changed his family, no one listened to him. Till he said, I'm going to change myself. Changed himself, he changed his family, he changed the community, and he had an effect over the whole world. Beautiful. It's really true, very correct. The Rebbe basically started his mission with partnership. You know, all the great teachers made sure that there was a distance between them and the ordinary. Could you imagine someone that has 2 PhDs in physics, and there's a kid who's in 8th grade and wants to join? And you say, look, listen here, little kid, you're a little boy, you don't belong here. And then when someone tries to go into a nuclear plant because he has a chemistry set at home, and he's a big macher, you know, I know how to make a little, and little boy, little girl, this is not for you. If you have to change the world, who are you going to bring into your circle? Super Jews, that's who you're going to bring into your circle. You're gonna find the 36 hidden saints, the Lamed Vav Malach, and say to them, listen here, we got to do it, no one else is doing it. You know what the Rebbe said? He said, I need a partner. I want you to help me. It has never happened, not in the Rambam, not in Rashi, not in any Chassidic world, where Moshe Rabbeinu says, you know, without this little girl lighting candles, without this little boy saying the Shema before going to bed, and without this little nobody giving, so the world is so beautiful, it's not going to happen. I need you. That's how we started, and that's what he continued. He said, I did my part, but my partners, where are you? Where are you? We're almost there. We're almost there. Gimmel Tammuz is a time where we're so thankful and grateful that the Rebbe made us his partner. Me and you can make this world nicer and more beautiful. And me and you and I are actually, even by reminding ourselves of this, is actually effectuating and making the light of the Mashiach more real. Because what will happen when the Mashiach will appear? The world will become not only more refined, but it will be revealed as a world of kindness, of godliness. So there's so much that we can improve in. And I would, for me, learning the Rebbe's Sichos, which I don't do enough, but even when I learn a little bit of the Rebbe's Torah, it's so refreshing and so uplifting. You would be doing an injustice to yourself if you didn't open up one of the English books or an English and study something of the Rebbe. When you study something of the Rebbe, you won't be a thief anymore. It just won't allow you to do that.
bam da 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 ya da 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 ya da da dam da da dam bam bam. Lai lai da 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 ya da da ya da da dam da dam bam bam. Lai lai da 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 ya da da dam bam 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 bam. Da 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 la da da.
So I mentioned about the Rebbe's teaching, how it changes a person. Let me share with you one of the many lessons that the Rebbe teaches. We just finished 2 weeks ago reading about a story that the Jewish people are a couple of weeks away from the land of Israel. You remember, they leave Egypt, they come to the wilderness of Sinai, they receive the Torah, and then they spend 11 months afterwards next to it, and then they're essentially ready to go into the land of Canaan, to conquer it, and to make it the promised land, and we would live happily ever after. So the Torah tells us that God comes to Moshe with a message. Send spies to reconnoiter the land, to check out the land. And Moshe Rabbeinu calls 12 representatives, each and every one of them a very, very important personality. And he says, I want you to go into the land, check it out. There are fortified cities, there are open cities, there are places where nothing grows, there's very fertile places. So bring back some of the fruit so we could actually appreciate and see the land, and come back and let us know about conquering the land. 10 of the people come back, and we know the story. They say like this: it's really a tremendous land. I mean, literally, if you live in this land, you become a giant. However, they're very powerful people. We'll never be able to do it. And God gets very angry, and he says, I'm going to destroy them, and Moshe prays for them. So finally, there's a compromise. This generation that showed cowardice, they didn't want to conquer the land, fine, you'll stay in the desert, but your children will have more courage, more bravery, they'll conquer the land. And of course there are many, many pages, in fact we could say hundreds of pages, written to describe what's going on exactly over here. Our Rebbe asks a very novel question actually. When you look at the verse, Hashem says like this, not shlach Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, not send spies, but shlach lecha anoshim, send spies for you. What does that mean, send spies for you? Moshe Rabbeinu needed spies? He didn't trust God? What does it mean for you? Rashi tells us that the word send spies for you means I'm not telling you to send the spies. If you want, you could send it. The Midrash tells us that Hashem says, I'm not telling you to send the spies, but if you do, it's going to be for your benefit. What's going on over here? The Rebbe asks a simple question. God gives them directions exactly what to do every single day. When it comes to conquering the land, Hashem says to Moshe, I'm not telling you, I'm not getting involved. You do it if you want. Is that the way we're supposed to conquer the land of Israel? The land of milk and honey? Why did Hashem tell Moshe that send spies, but I'm leaving it up to you? As if to say, Moshe could have said no. And the Rebbe brings a beautiful, beautiful lesson. Going into the land of Israel means conquering a land that was inhabited by idolaters and pagans and completely immoral people. And we're going to conquer that land. Hashem says, conquering that land, I could give you directions and instructions how to conquer the land, but I'm going to leave it open for you to figure out how to use it. In other words, Hashem says, Moshe says to the spies, we have to go into the land and we're going to fight for the land. Any army that goes into, especially a foreign land, has to know the weak points. So God's going to help us. God's going to do the whole thing. But we have to do our input. Because if we're supposed to conquer the land miraculously, all we have to do is stay in the desert and God will make a plague, wipe them out, give them a COVID, and afterwards we just walk in and wipe it off. No, they had to fight. But They had to fight in a miraculous, God was making miracles for them, but they had to fight. It's very much what's happening in the past and even in the present in Israel. They're fighting, but the success that they've had and will continue to have in a more revealed way is when we use the physicality. So we send in one soldier, and without one soldier could do the miraculous. But there has to be a soldier there. You have to use the physical. As you all know the joke, which I won't repeat, buy the ticket. Don't expect to win the lottery. It's a miracle if you win the lottery, but you have to spend $1 and a dream, and God will make that miracle. So what happens in the Chumash is actually a message for us. It's not that God left it up to Moses. Do you want to send or not send? No. You have to send. Because the way to conquer Israel is to know as much as you can know about the land of Israel. So find the best way to do it. Find the most effective way, the greatest strategy. Find the weak point to go into the land. That's your responsibility. As far as whether or not you could conquer them, that's not a question. Of course you could conquer them. I promised you that victory. So the Rebbe's insight in this particular case, and I'm just giving a slice, is Shlach Lecha Anoshim is not that Moshe made a mistake. Moshe did what Hashem wanted him to do, which is empower his people to conquer the land. So where did it go wrong? Where it went wrong is they thought it was up to them. They should have come back and said, yes, there's a strong point. We should go to the weaker point, but it really makes no difference because no matter what, we will be successful. If we bring this down to us in our level, we could talk about it on a personal level. So, for example, the Rebbe reminds us, based on the Midrash, that the world is a garden and we're a gardener. Okay, I'm not a gardener. I don't know all of the details, but I have a vague idea that one of the most important jobs of a gardener is to take out the weeds. A gardener has to make sure that the land where beautiful flowers and beautiful trees are growing, we have to create the land, the earth, in a manner where the most beautiful stuff could grow. So if we're the gardeners of this world, what do we have to do? We have to take out the weeds in our own house, in our own heart. Everyone knows what they could use improvement in. We're going to be successful no matter what, because God's will take place. This is a beautiful world. The Mashiach will come. We will do teshuvah. These are absolute. There's nothing negotiable about it. The question merely is how fast and in what manner. And when a person is a gardener and looks at the trees and sees worms and realizes that if he spritzes something, if he uses some type of a pesticide, whatever it might be, and some people claim if you talk to your flowers it will grow, so if you play Mozart and talk to your flowers it will grow. This is stuff that's in our hands. We will be successful no matter what, but we could do it as a partner with Hashem and a partner with the Rebbe. So there are many stories. There are a couple of stories. One very famous one. This happened a long, long time ago, so like in the early years of Shlichus. Shlichus means the Rebbe sending out his emissaries. There was one fellow who was sent out to a certain place in America, like a state or whatever, and he was told, your job is to make this place into a holy place. And here's a guy who doesn't speak English well, does not have an MBA, Master of Business, and knows nothing about the proper way to talk to big shots. And he comes with his family, and he builds, and he builds, and he builds, and to everyone's surprise, including himself, he's very successful. He has a school, a preschool, a this, a that. And he comes back, he's overworked, overwhelmed, and very grateful that he's doing the work of God. And when he's in 770, the Rebbe's personal secretary, whose name was Rabbi Chodakov, says to him, he says, we're hearing very good reports about you, so the Rebbe would like to give you another geography, another half a state to take care of. So he looks at Rabbi Chodakov and he says, you got to be kidding. I'm struggling. My nose is just about above this, and I could barely handle what I have, and you expect me to do more? And Rabbi Chodakov was very curt with him. He said, you think your success is yours? As if to say, you accomplish, but now you can't accomplish more. So he realized his big mistake. He said, no, I'm willing to take it. To which he said, no, the Rebbe will give it to someone else. Because if you were, for one moment, thinking that your success is your success, and it's not divine providence and divine miracles, literally, that's coming from the Rebbe, you're not much of a chassid, nor are you going to be successful as a shliach. It's a story we all know, and it's a story that we understand deeply, and occasionally we have difficulty with that. I spoke nicely, I charmed so-and-so, my kid, they fell in love with my kids, all that type of stuff. It's all me? It's not me. There's a divine blessing that we get from God. That divine blessing that we get from God is often magnified and directed by the Moses of our generation, which is our Rebbe. And anything that we could consider successful is because we understand we're nothing more than the moon reflecting the light of the sun. But as the Rebbe used that metaphor so many times, the light of the moon is different than the light of the sun. Without the sun, there's no moon. So all it does is reflect the light of the moon, of the sun. But it's a different light. It's a cool light, it's a romantic light, there's a different feeling at night. With a full moon, it's beautiful. Very different than a full sun and it's 143 degrees outside. Very different. So you're reflecting the sun, but is it the sunlight or is it not the sunlight? It's the sunlight that's shining through the moon or off the moon. The Rebbe's smile is his smile. Our smile is the Rebbe's smile coming through us. The Rebbe's power is the Rebbe's power. Our power is the Rebbe's power flowing through us. It's shlach lecha, send for you messengers. I could do it without the messengers, but that's using miracles. I want to use the physicality of this. I want to use a gardener, even if the gardener has no idea what he's doing. But I need a gardener in the garden to garden. Every one of us reflects that power that the Torah gave us and the Rebbe explained to us and continues to give. So, I guess people are tired already, so I'll try to put it together slowly. I mean quickly. There's I heard from Rabbi Greenberg from Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska. He was Farbrengen, and actually he's an old timer. He's actually only a couple of years older than me, but he went on shlichus before me. And he's the one that coined the frozen chosen. And the Chabad, they loved him because, all of the pictures that they have of him, he's wearing a parka. He looks like an Eskimo, an Eskimo with a Chassidic beard. And he built up a very nice thing in Anchorage, a lot of, especially with the cruise ships, everyone uses him for Chabad. So he told the story that for years they're thinking about Fairbanks. If you Google, you'll see Fairbanks is colder than Anchorage, and it's has I think a long. If you want to see the northern lights, that's where you go. It's basically like months in darkness. And Rabbi Greenberg lets it be known in the Chabad circles that that Farbrengen is available for whichever Meshugana wants it. Sure enough, a couple, I think it's from Israel, I don't know, calls him up and say, we're interested. He said, listen here, I got to tell you the truth. It's Gehenna. You're going to a frozen hell. It's dark. People get depressed when they don't see the sun. For 3 months, you're not going to see the sun. It's 40 below zero sometimes. So you don't really want it. I'm just letting you know that it's available. You're from Israel. I want it. I talk it over with you. I did. She wants it. He says, what do you know about Alaska? Nothing. Just what they saw in the books. He said what you saw in the books is during the summer when it could get 70 degrees in Anchorage. It's beautiful. That's what you saw. You saw beautiful pictures of Anchorage in the summer. You have to see in the winter. They don't even really have good air things. A lot of it is like private planes. We want it. She said, you know what? Let's see if I could find someone interested in sponsoring you. He's very good friends with Rabbi Kornfeld from Seattle, Washington. I don't know how this guy knows people, but he knows people and there's a wealthy guy who owns a hotel, and he said, I'll sponsor his first year's salary or something like that. So he finds out, and he calls up this guy from his. He says, I don't know, strange things are happening, but if you go, you don't have to fundraise the first year. When can I come? He says, listen here, I don't want it on my conscience that a young couple, I think they have a baby, is going to go to a place and they're going to curse me every day. I don't want that. I'll tell you what, why don't you try it out for a couple of weeks in the winter and let me know. And I'll talk to this guy who will pay for your hotel. They loved it. He didn't hear anything from this guy until like February or March, whatever it was, and he gets a file of pictures. In the picture, there's this couple dressed like Eskimos, and in the back, they had like one of these banks that have the temperature, something like 15 below zero, and they're smiling. And it says, we were here and we won it. He can't believe this happened last year. He said, okay, I'll talk to the person. The person says, I put them up. I like them. You know what? I'm going to buy them a house. So when they come, they don't even have to. So he buys them $250,000. For here, $250,000 gets you the backyard. But over there, $250,000 is a very large house with a large room for a sanctuary. He pays it. Not only that, he wants renovations. So he buys it. They started renovations, and he rents for them a house across the street. So I hear Rabbi Greenberg, he's Farbrengen. He says, you want to know if the Rebbe does miracles? Here's a Chabad shliach who has a Chabad house and a Chabad and a salary. He never even came there. If that's not a miracle, he doesn't know what is. And then he continues about his son-in-law. He said, I offered it to my son-in-law, Fairbanks, but instead, my son-in-law decided he wants Africa. So guess what? He's the shliach now in Kenya. I forgot to look it up. Rabbi Greenberg said it has 5 million people. I don't know. That's what he said. Kenya. So the president of Kenya, believe it or not, loves Israel. He's like a Bible fanatic. He loves Israel. So he's going to visit Israel, and of course Israel's so desperate for people that like them, So you could be the president of Sri Lanka or something like that, and the president of Kenya. Yeah. So he's given. He's going to be seen by Bibi is much too busy, but by Herzog, the president. So Rabbi Greenberg hears this, that the president of Kenya is going to be seen by Herzog. So he starts using his Chabad connections. Who knows Herzog? Just so happens to be there's a gazillionaire who no one's supposed to know his name, from Israel, who goes to Kenya and he buys jewelry and stuff like that, diamonds, and he knows the president. He knows Herzog, and he knows about the president of Kenya. So Rabbi Greenberg calls him up and he says, do me a favor, call up the president Herzog and tell him that when the president of Kenya comes, he should put a plug for the new shliach that's coming. He should say that he represents Israel for us. So that's what happened. The president of Kenya goes to Israel, and the president of Israel tells him about a shliach that didn't even move yet, is going to move into Kenya, and the president should know that he's the best friend of the state of Israel, and if he loves Israel, he has to love Chabad. So I heard, that's what he just said. So he says, you want miracles? There's so many miracles that are just spilling over. It's not even miracles anymore. So if I didn't tell you it was a miracle, it'd be, yeah, I mean, it's great. We have a Chabad Shliach now in Fairfax. He has a beautiful Chabad house. How did he make it? How did he get it? Where was his... It was ready-made. The Rebbe is preparing the world for Mashiach and giving us not only the opportunity to participate with him, but he's actually doing all the heavy lifting. But a little bit we got to do. We got to look at ourselves and take out some of the weeds. And it's always easier to see it than someone else, so we have to go out of our way and find at least one person, invite them for Shabbos, give them a mezuzah, give them a menorah, start a class with them, something. It's like not even a finger. So before I conclude, I once heard this from, I don't know which speaker, but I loved it. He said, a lot of times people are looking for a word to describe something. He thought of this word that describes Rebbe. You know what the word is? I mean, I would say tzaddik, leader, holy. Yeah. You know what the word he found? Urgent. The Rebbe had an urgency about him. There's no wasting time. There's no tomorrow. In fact, I believe this actually happened with the Rabbi, if not one of the Chassidim, where they were told that a great holy tzaddik, it's probably more from one of the Chassidim that said this, that it's a make-believe story. One tzaddik fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and finally Hashem said, because of your holy prayers, the Mashiach will come in a month. Oh. He announces this to the world. There's jubilation. There's people say, why do I have to go steal? Mashiach comes, there'll be plenty of everything. And countries say, you know what, why don't we postpone the war for a month? Let's just see what happens. You know, everyone is excited. Everyone is preparing, except for one person who's upset, depressed, angry. You know what that person is? The Rebbe. I have to wait 29 days? Do you know what that means? 29 days Jews are in pain. 29 days the divine presence is in pain. 29 days we cannot bring an offering to Hashem. The temple is not there. 29 days we are losing, hemorrhaging Jews. What do you mean in 30 days? We can't wait 30 days. Shchinta begalusa. The Rebbe had this sense of it has to happen, it has to happen. And he once said a very interesting thing, maybe more than once. He spoke about children. And he said, the thing about children is they have no sense of waiting. If you tell a child, in 10 minutes from now, I want it now. Tomorrow, I want it now. When we get home, I want it now, I want it now, I want it now. What's wrong with you? It's just 9 minutes. Wait until we get to the car. Children are urgent. If they have something that they want it now. And the Rebbe said, this is something which, as upsetting as it might be, sometimes it's something we have to learn from. We don't want Mashiach to come tomorrow. Why can't he come tonight? He should come tonight. Why should he come tonight? Because right now we have soldiers that are in danger. We have people sleeping in bomb shelters. We have people dating people from other people of faith. We have people in the hospital. What do you mean tomorrow? What about all of them? It's good for me. I'm going to go to bed and have a good night's sleep. What about all those people who are not going to have a good night's sleep? What do you mean Mashiach will come later? This sense of urgency, well, you meet someone today, talk to him. Grab the opportunity. One of the things the Rebbe was so upset about was these big organizations that have endowment funds. Endowment funds. What's an endowment fund? You have $800 million. You don't know what to do with it, so let's invest it. And we'll take a small amount of money, 10%, whatever it is, and we'll find a need for it. And the Rebbe says, what about the boys and girls that are being lost to Judaism every single day? If there was enough Jewish teachers and Jewish schools and scholarships available for all, we would be saving Jewish children, which means Jewish families, which means Jewish future. So what are you saving the money for? You think God can't make more money? He can't give you? This whole concept of an endowment fund, the Rebbe found anathema. If you have the capacity to grow, grow. If you have the money to do good, do it. Don't invest it. I'm not against investing. I just want to point out that the Rebbe was urgent. Every mitzvah, that's what we have to do. So really, that's what we have to do. To end with one thing. To describe the Rebbe's mind is an impossibility. It's not once in a generation. It's really once in in 1,000 years or 10,000 years. I mean, the Rebbe's mind, just so much. Of course, to describe the Rebbe's soul is none of our business. We have no idea what our soul is. We certainly can't talk about his soul. What we could do is make an observation. An observation. I'm a little bit off the subject, but I want to end with this. The observation is, the Rebbe's had such tremendous knowledge of everything. So an engineer came into him, the Rebbe spoke to him as an engineer would speak to an engineer. Sometimes the Rebbe was superior, sometimes the Rebbe said, I don't know, tell me. I'm interested. The Rebbe was very humble. But he was an electrician, electrical engineer. I forget, it was one of the Gem videos. There was someone who was an electrical engineer, and the Rebbe said, can you please explain to me this and that? He said, I felt like humble, like this is the Rebbe, I'm going to teach you. Rebbe said, look, in this case, you're my Rebbe. Just like that. So to an engineer, he spoke as an engineer. To a doctor, he spoke doctor. To a teacher, he spoke teacher. So imagine a fellow comes in and says, Rebbe, I have questions. I have real questions. Philosophically speaking, can God make a rock that he can't pick up? You know how the Rebbe would answer usually? Like a child. To every field, he responded like that field. When it came to belief, the Rebbe almost suspended his absolute brilliance and spoke with the purity and the innocence of a child. Every Farbrengen, I think without exception, besides talking about Mashiach and giving blessings, the Rebbe, when he spoke about Torah, would always say these words. And the Torah's Chayim is a Torah of life, and Torah's Emes, and it's a Torah of truth. And if the Torah tells us this is what's going to be. He just gave a learned discussion. The great rabbis in the back, well, they were smiling. Yeah, you could see them, like they were enjoying this. And he ends off by saying, so the Torah is true, and the Torah gives us life, and we have to follow what the Torah says. The Rebbe loved children, and one of the reasons why he loved the children is because they were so unsophisticated. They were so true. They were so simple. They were pure. There's a purity in a child. So if you tell a child that why can't we go to the park because it's raining? And he says, well, why is it raining? You say, because Hashem wanted it to rain. He says, okay. And if he asks me and you, well, why didn't Hashem take into account what I want? Children have this uncomplicated belief system. The Rebbe had that so truthful, so it was so truthful with all of his sichos and all of his brilliant, amazing, everything that he has, the correspondence and everything else. What comes through is one thing: God is true. The Jewish people are true. Every Jew is good. Mashiach will come. We will be successful. I mean, it's like, come on. And that innocence and purity is real truth. So l'chaim, today we celebrate the Rebbe connecting to me and to you. And you can and should do it. Study his works, get his pictures, very worthwhile. Most of all, practice what he says. Do goodness, do kindness, spread Yiddishkeit. The world is ready. L'chaim. Yisrael have no fear, Mashiach will be here this year. Yisrael have no fear, Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach.